When it comes to helping build a culture of feedback at your organization, there are a couple of things that HR teams can do. One of them is make feedback less scary by making it part of your employee values or your company values. Make it part of regular systems and set expectations. So that can be creating the tools and the systems in place to create regular feedback loops, recognitions and awards for people who are constantly and consistently giving feedback in ways that are well received, and providing trainings to make it more normal and more expected. This is not just top down for managers, teaching managers how to give feedback. It's also bottom up, helping employees learn how to ask for feedback. Giving regular employee feedback has a lot of benefits for employees. First of all, when it comes to employee-manager relationships, it often can build trust, especially if that feedback is both positive and constructive. And the second thing is that it builds engagement. You're not just doing work and sending it off into the ether and never hearing back. You're actually getting someone coming back and saying, hey, here's what's great about that, and here's how you can do better. It also signals that the company is interested in you as an individual and your professional development. So you create a stronger affinity to that company and greater company loyalty. As someone who is a manager in the workforce, if someone's watching this, you are working, you have received feedback, and you know that it actually helps you show up better and do your work better and actually grow as an employee. So it's important to give feedback to employees because it helps your career growth. In our careers, we've all received feedback that has been really helpful and feedback that has been really hurtful or makes us feel defensive. So when you're giving feedback, there are a couple of things to note about what makes feedback good and what makes feedback unhelpful or bad. Feedback that is empathetic, that is very precise, going back to a specific instance or action or point in a document, and that has an immediate solution or next step to resolve, is really helpful feedback. Feedback that is general, that is shaming, and that is really blaming without a recourse or a next step to solve the issue is unhelpful. For example, if you're working with an employee on a specific document, you can ask them to jump in for 5 minutes and say, hey, I've noticed that you have some issues and attention to detail here. Can you go ahead and make these 2 or 3 changes? That's very clear. It shows them where their issue is, and it gives them a clear step for how to solve it. Bad feedback is feedback that's shameful. So if you jump on a line with your employee, or if you give them feedback that they are unreliable or they're just doing a bad job, that isn't actionable. That doesn't tell them where exactly they're going wrong and how to fix it. So it feels very shaming, and it can make your employee feel defensive and make you feel like you're not a good manager for them because you're not helping them get better. Ultimately, as managers, our jobs are really to be coaches to employees. We don't point out their flaws, we point out how they can get better. And with that mindset, employee feedback gets a little bit easier because you really know what you're going for. In the past, most companies would run an annual or a biannual performance review where you would summarize someone's performance and you would give them feedback. That's really unhelpful because if they made a mistake 3 or 4 months ago, they're going to keep making that mistake until you bring it up. By the time an annual review rolls around, you've had 12 months, or if it's a biannual review, you've had 6 months to let an issue fester. So if someone is consistently delivering deadlines 1 or 2 days late, that's going to be a trend that continues for 6 months before you address it. However, if you give them frequent feedback and you call it out the second or the third time that it happens, you can really get ahead of the issue, and something that could have been really problematic to an employee's growth or your team's work could have been addressed much earlier. So frequent feedback is really beneficial for the individual to make the change in the moment and to improve the workflows of your team and your experience with that person. So if you're a manager getting ready to give employee feedback, there's a couple of things that you can do to structure your feedback conversation. The first one is start with a micro question. Reach out to your employee and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes to talk about XYZ? Or let them know, hey, in our next meeting, I want to shift from focusing on just the agenda and what we're working on to have some reflection and some time for feedback and coaching. Giving someone a heads up and a little bit of time to prepare is really helpful for putting someone in a place to be receptive. Once you start the conversation, keep it focused on one thing. If you start your feedback session and you say, hey, we're going to talk about 10 things you're doing wrong, that's overwhelming and it swamps a person with shame. So keep it really focused. And then you can really talk about what you're doing well, where the employee can improve, and it gives the individual time to really process that one area and make a focused improvement there. Positive feedback is really easy for managers to give. You did great on this assignment. You really rocked this product launch. You did a wonderful job in this report. But giving negative or constructive feedback is a little bit more challenging because difficult conversations can be very awkward. So some of the biggest barriers for managers giving difficult feedback is fear of how your employee is going to respond, or fear of how well you're going to do a job delivering that information. That second element of fear comes from not having a model or a framework or sufficient training on how to deliver feedback. And then finally, the last one is time. It takes time to craft a way to build feedback in a mindful approach. If you're a manager who is overloaded and doing 1,000 things at once, just dropping a piece of feedback in a Slack conversation or in Microsoft Teams is not a great experience for your employee. So taking the time to be mindful, to think through what you're going to say, and then be in a calm and clear state of mind to present that information is really important. Once you're done giving feedback, ask them how it landed. Say, how did this land with you? Or what do you think? Or how are you feeling about this? This is really helpful because it gives the employee the chance to respond or share how they're feeling. There's no one right way to give employee feedback. There's no one model that always works all the time for everybody. So just assume that it's important to know that everyone functions a little bit differently, and ask your employees or ask your coworkers how they like to receive feedback.